Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, happy Good Friday to you. It's not only a Good Friday, but it's a great Friday. I woke up this morning, kind of had that song in my head, zippity-doo-dah-day. You know, I was feeling good. My, oh my, what a wonderful day. And I thought about, why was I feeling so upbeat? And it was because of the day after Mueller report. The day after Mueller Day, ladies and gentlemen. And according to that song, it's what the report this may or may not apply, but from my perspective, it does. It was actual, factual. And to me, it was very satisfactual because there was and is and has never been any collusion. And contrary to what the mainstream media would have you believe, it is a total, and yes, I said it, a total exoneration of the president. And we're going to get into why I feel that way in just a moment. But our word for the day is Bastion. Bastion, an institution, a place or person strongly defending or upholding particular principles, attitudes, or activities, because we've had a lot of attitudes, we've had a lot of activities, and we've been a bit short on principles, at least on one side of the aisle. This first article is from the New York Times, and it's an opinion piece by a guy named Noah Bookbinder. And my actual subtitle to this is The Last Bastion of If True. Because the Democrats have always had, they came out with this thing a while back, if true, and you remember for the last 6 months or so, they've been going about President Trump, if true, such and such, if true, if true. So this is the last bastion of if true, because it's proved to be not true. And if it's not true, guess what? It's a lie. So this is, as I say, coming to you from the New York Times, Mr. Mueller's damning report. Wow. So the report was damning. Who was it damning on? That'd be my first question. But Noah Bookbinder is writing this opinion for the New York Times. And you may say, well, who is Mr. Bookbinder? And that's a great name for a writer, right? Bookbinder. But Noah Bookbinder is the executive director of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. I really wish that were true. In other words, if true, I wish there were Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. That would probably be like one of the sites that's taken our show. If you want to know what Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, it would probably be Citizens for Trump. That's who. But anyway, let's get on to this opinion piece. But basically, I don't know in the New York Times, what's the difference between a news article and an opinion piece? I can't find the difference from reading it, all the news that is unfit to print. The final report by Special Counsel Robert Mueller is devastating for the president. That's the first thing. Devastating. Now,
I hope you hear me laughing in the back.
Yeah, that's Jay, my producer in the back, man. Good morning, Jay. He seems like he's in a zippity-doo-dah mood too. Maybe he's a pretty big guy, so I can't have him beat a little bluebird on my shoulder because I'd be like, eh. But think about it. They just can't let it go, man. It's like those cat cat things you see over there. Hang in there, baby. They just cannot let this go. But far from total and complete exoneration, according to Mr. Bookbinder, that President Trump prematurely claimed that Attorney General William Barr released his 4-page summary of Mr. Mueller's work. The special counsel's report over the course of the 400-plus pages, according to Mr. Bookbinder here, lays out a compelling case. Even, I love this part, they don't see the hypocrisy in their own writing. He says, even absent a prosecutive conclusion. In other words, what he's saying is, even without any evidence of collusion or obstruction of justice, and we'll talk about more in detail in a minute, the report, man, it paints a bad picture for the president. He says it have obstruction of justice by the president. Nonsense, man. Think about this. First of all, they've admitted now, think about this, they have admitted that there was no collusion. So the basis for the entire investigation was bullshit. It's just the way it is. But now they want to accuse the president of obstructing justice on a crime that was never committed. I mean, so the whole report should have ended. I mean, Rush Limbaugh is right. The whole report should have been like a page and a half and ended, 2 years ago. He's absolutely right about that.
They all sound like something's being obstructed when they're on the toilet. That's what they sound like.
Well, the obstruction is at some loose wire in their brain. They're all suffering. I know what it is. It's kind of the American version of the Ebola virus. It's Trump derangement syndrome. They're like, so it's coming out of every orifice of your body, man. Maybe that's what President Trump meant when he was talking about Megyn Kelly and all that. Maybe she had Trump derangement syndrome, which means it just pours out everywhere. Anyway, the report makes clear, according to Mr. Bookbinder, the report makes clear that sounds like a name from Harry Potter, doesn't it? Mr. Bookbinder. The report makes clear that the president's obstruction of the FBI and special counsel investigations crossed constitutional boundaries that could have merited criminal prosecution. So he's kind of like channeling his inner Shifty Schiff, right? Adam Schiff, that I've seen evidence. We don't never show it to you, but I've seen it. It's out there in the ether. It's like you can't see it. It's like, here it is. but there's nothing there, right? It just seems to evaporate when it sees the light of day. But he says, if not for the Justice Department's policy against indicting sitting presidents, think about that. They're talking about indicting a sitting president for something that didn't happen. It kind of reminds me of what we talked about yesterday about that school district wanting to rename, change the name of their school district in California from Dixie because it represents the Confederacy, even though it actually represents a lady named Mary Dixie, who was a Native American. So, I mean, they raise hell, so to speak, about stuff that never happened. It's crazy. It just is insane. But Mr. Mueller's report, back to the article, that's what Billy Bob tells me, by the way. If you're new to our show, and we've got growing listeners by the day, this is my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass. He keeps me straight. He has a Twitter twat handle, by the way. That's what I call myself, a Twitter twat. He has one that's called @BillyBobBass1, and mine is @JohnMartinTalks. So go in there and follow us, and we'll probably be pretty active this weekend. I've got to believe. But Mr. Mueller reports that his office explicitly considered absolving the president. So they thought about giving him a total exoneration on obstruction of justice, but emphatically chose not to. Emphatically. Now, this is what this guy's saying. Think about this. A prosecutor's job is not to exonerate people. That's not what they do. They are to prosecute people, and what they're supposed to do is bring forward evidence of their prosecution. So if they choose not to prosecute you, it's because it's not saying that it is not necessarily saying you're not guilty. I would assume that, but that's not the job of the prosecutor to determine guilt anyway. It is simply to determine that there's enough evidence to go forward with a criminal prosecution. That's what the word prosecute means. I hate to tell you that, bookbinder dude. That's what prosecution means. And the report clearly shows that there was not enough evidence in Bobby Mueller's opinion to push forward on a prosecution. If that's not exoneration, I don't know what the hell is, man. I mean, if I'm accused of a crime and they can't find the evidence, I don't care if they say you're exonerated or not, as long as they let me go. I mean, hey, I don't care what you call it. I'm out of here. It's just crazy, man. But the report, let me tell you, this is what the report makes clear to me, that it was a witch hunt from the very beginning. The very beginning. And senior members, these are my words, senior members of the FBI were first. If we're wondering about, when they talk about Ebola, they try to find where it started so they can trace it back. It appears to me that Trump derangement syndrome started at the core of the FBI. And so they've been, if you want to trace it back to where the disease first showed symptoms, it was when Strzok and Stroke Page, or whatever their names were. Far from ending the matter, the Mueller report, this is back to the article, far from ending the matter, the Mueller report is unmistakable act of deference to Congress's primary jurisdiction over accountability to for the president. The House, according to Mr. Bookbinder, the House Judiciary Committee, and by the way, the New York Times, must now pick up where Mr. Mueller left off and begin holding proceedings to determine whether Mr. Trump abused the powers of his office. So he says that far from ending the matter, and this is one area where I would agree with you, sir. Don't tune out till you hear what I'm saying here. I agree with Mr. Big Bookbinder. It's kind of like butt get. I can't say booty edge or whatever. I don't know. I have trouble with some of these names. It's part of being an old country boy, I guess. But I would agree with him that it is not the end. It should be the end, but it's not. It may be, as what did Joe Scarborough say the other day on this is before the report. He quoted Winston Churchill. It's not the end of the beginning, but it is the beginning of the end. I don't know. It's something crazy. In other words, they're gonna keep going. But the investigation should never, back to my words, started, let alone lasted for over 2 years. The true purpose of this investigation, and this is becoming more and more clear, at least to me, it's perfectly clear, was to end the Trump presidency. You know, they say Trump supposedly said when he first heard Mueller was going to be appointed, that's the end of my presidency. Well, I don't know if he said that or not. I wouldn't blame him for saying it, because that certainly was the reason. It was the insurance policy, as old Stroke and Struck said back in those texts that were messages that were released to his lover, Miss Page, that he had an insurance policy. That's the Mueller investigation. And my opinionated fact was the insurance policy. The Mueller report now, so to me, the investigation itself was to try to end Trump's presidency, not just from impeachment. They were, you know what they were, I think they were really hoping was to put so much pressure on President Trump and potentially his family and associates that he would just say, screw this, I'm out of here, I'm leaving on my jet plane. You know, and who would have really blamed him? Really, who would have really blamed a person for doing that? But thank God, President Trump, we picked the right man at the right time, because he said bupkis to you. You know, he basically said, not on my watch, man. I ain't giving up. I'm not giving up. And I really appreciate that. I have even more respect for President Trump standing up for the last 2.5 years to this ridiculous, as in his own words, bullshit. He showed a lot more stones than the rest of these people. But so the Mueller report was, in my opinion, designed to drive Trump out of office, either by impeachment or him just saying, hey, I didn't sign up for all this crap. But now the Mueller report itself, why it took 2 years, so they failed, right? It didn't work. It seems designed to me, and this is why they didn't, quote, exonerate him, to keep the Democratic investigations going. If there's just enough red meat, so to speak, in this to give some kind of prop, if they needed any, to the Dems in Congress, in the legislature, under Nancy Pelosi, or Speaker of the House, Ocasio-Cortez. She already is really the Speaker of the House. Why not just go ahead and make her that? It gives them fodder to keep their fire going. The report details egregious evidence, back to the article, egregious evidence of obstruction, emphasizing the pattern of conduct that the president took after James Comey, then the FBI director, confirmed the Bureau's investigation into possible links between Trump campaign and Russia. Now, here's what really irks me or pisses me off. They knew, they being people like all these people, Mueller even, all these people, that's why they needed, quote, an insurance policy. They knew from the beginning that this whole thing was nonsense, that there was no conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians. They knew it. And in the opening parts of the report, it basically talks about how the whole investigation started when Papadopoulos, and I'm not certainly negative, but he was such a minor figure, man. Think about that, too. And that he supposedly talked to some ambassador from Australia over a drink, and that started the whole investigation. They were fishing, man, from the beginning. They just looked, and Papadopoulos was their dupe. That's all there is to it. But they knew, this is what pissed me, they knew that collusion was BS from the beginning. Think about this. They certainly knew it over a year ago. Over a year ago, the Mueller team, the FBI, the Department of Justice knew that this collusion aspect of the report was bullshit over a year ago. And let me tell you how I know this for a fact. Do you know that in the conclusion of the report, at the 2.5 years, it said, and this is very important. I mentioned this at the top, at the beginning of the show yesterday. that the report concluded that there was no collusion, not only between any members of President Trump or any members of his organization, but no Americans, period, right? Remember that? But when was the first time, and a lot of you may have forgotten this, but old Salty Dog hadn't forgotten it. When was the first time we heard that? We have heard that before. We heard that over a year ago. Back when, you remember when Mueller came out, what I think it was 13 indictments of Russians that weren't, not Americans, but Russians who supposedly like hacked into the DNC and all of that kind of stuff. You remember that? And he issued indictments and warrants for them. Do you remember did I say, help me with this, Jay, Rod Rosenstein? Is that how you say it? Rod Rosenstein.
Like Frankenstein.
Like Frankenstein. Rod Rosenstein, who is the deputy attorney general, he said back in February of last year, you may not remember this, Jay, when he was announcing these indictments that had come out of the Mueller, because keep in mind, he was the head of he was the overseer of the Mueller investigation. Rod Rosenstein said that no Americans were involved back then. So over a year ago, they knew that no Americans were involved. So if no Americans were involved, why didn't they end the investigation right then? It's because that was never the intent of the investigation. The intent of the investigation was to keep the pressure on President Trump.
What difference at this point does it make?
It makes a hell of a lot of difference because they kept the pressure. They've been lying to you, the American people, from the very beginning, certainly over a year now. But much of the most alarming conduct is well known, is what the guy says. It sure was. The Mueller report shows, let me tell you what the Mueller report shows. In my view, it shows like which came first, the chicken or the egg, or either or, right? And what I mean by that is if you go back and look at the report and read it, essentially it's nothing in it that's new. Every single thing in the report has been in some sort of press article for the last 2.5 years. It seemed like as they investigated, there'd be a news article came out. So that's why I say chicken or the egg. I don't know if Mueller and his team were leaking to the press or the press was actually telling them what they should be looking at, because there definitely is a symbiotic relation there. This report, one of the reasons why it is not this, bombshell, is because it's already come out. They've been dripping it out all along. So there's some kind of symbiotic, I don't know, chicken or the egg. I know difference between chicken salad and chicken whatever, and this whole report is the latter, that's for sure. Crucial to the report's explicitly rejects many of the most prominent defenses of the president that have been articulated by the president's lawyers and Attorney General Barr. How does it explicitly reject many of the most prominent defenses of the president? There was no crime. All the president is guilty of basically is running around saying, this is nonsense. I didn't do it. It's not true. It's a witch hunt. Who wouldn't have done that? And so thus this investigation was bogus from the start. How do you obstruct? Here's a question I hadn't had anybody be able to answer. How do you obstruct an investigation that is a bastion of bullshit from the beginning? How do you obstruct something that never actually happened? It's crazy. For the special counsel rejects, Mr. Bookbinder goes on, says, first, the special counsel rejects the notion that the Constitution forecloses scrutiny of the president's use of his own constitutional powers to impede the investigation. Instead, it says the conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction laws to the president corrupt exercise of power of his office. In other words, the president shouldn't be able to defend himself no matter what. Against false, salacious charges, the president's supposed to just sit there stoically. It's crazy, man. Some presidents may have done that, but who would have ever expected Donald Trump? That's why we elected Donald Trump, by the way, and we know we got the right guy because he just won't sit there and eat the bullshit you've been feeding us for all these years. He rejects it, and we love him for it, man. The conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction laws of the president corrupt the powers of his office accords with our constitutional system. Boy, this guy's got a mouthful. System of checks and balances and the principle that no person is above the law. Let me tell you my own translation of that. And that Billy Bob tells me that I better the president's got a better way of putting it. Can we play the president's opinion of all this? Do we have that clip?
The Democrats have to now decide whether they will continue defrauding the public with ridiculous bullshit.
That's the truth, because that's the only reason this report is coming out, and that's what Congress is doing. And I have to say to you, yes, unfortunate answer to your question, Mr. President, is yes, Mr. President, they absolutely will. So you've been doing a hell of a job standing up to them. I have no doubt you will continue to, but the fight is not over. It is not over. And while the report also details some exculpatory considerations, including the fact that the president, they put this language in there to make them look very intelligent, including the fact that the president in his campaign did not engage in an explicit or implicit conspiracy with the Russian government. Hey, if true, the investigation should have ended right there, Mr. Bookbinder. The document paints a picture, back to Bookbinder's words, the document paints a picture of a president who repeatedly tried to impede an investigation that he knew would be damaging to him, his family, and his associates. And I say to you, sir, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with trying to protect your family and your associates from this overreaching nonsense that, I mean, everything, they want you to be guilty until proven innocent. We saw all the way back to the Kavanaugh hearings that this bunch that has been hounding the president, including the press and the progressives in Congress, which are really one and the same, they don't care who they hurt. It's all about their agenda. So would you blame the president? I mean, to me, it would be a shame if we had a president that wouldn't stand up. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If Hillary Clinton, and hope she gets in under a serious investigation this time, but if she'd have been investigated by this man, she wouldn't have defended anybody. She didn't have the courage to face her own supporters when she got her butt beat on election night. She was in the room popping pills and drinking liquor, from what I hear, and let her people out who were crying, "Oh my God, Trump's here." She wouldn't even have the courage to face them. So you think she would stand up to do the right thing? No. That should be for all you out, and I'm glad she's not running. I suspect she might come back. But anybody who supported Hillary, how can you possibly support someone who didn't have the courage to face their own supporters after her defeat? How could that person ever be commander-in-chief? That's disqualifying, man. But although Mr. Mueller operated under different rules from Leon Jaworski, and he goes on to name all these people, Ken Starr and various people, he says that the judgment, as they did, that Congress, a body composed of elected representatives, is better placed than a prosecutor to determine whether to initiate proceedings that could result in an official's removal from office. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, right there. The only thing that matters is that the president is guilty. He's absolutely, and if you're new to my show, let me tell you, you might not understand this, but hang on. President Trump is 100% guilty of the worst crime that has ever been committed by anyone running for, let alone holding the office of president. And you know what that is? He won. He won, and that is all that matters. That is the whole pretense for this investigation from beginning to end and now. And why they want to continue the investigation is because the president won. And you think they were crying on election night? Wait till election night 2020, if and when the president, with your help out there, you dregs and deplorable sons of gun, MAGA hat wearing guys and gals, the president's doing his job. If you do your job, they gonna cry like you talk about the oceans rising. They are already rising for all the crying that's going on in D.C. right now. Think about that. I don't know if global warming, it's definitely real, thank God it is, but if it's ever man-made, it has really been man-made over the last couple of days, because all the hot air in Washington, combining that with the melting of the people, the snowflakes melting, and the tears of the progressives going, I thought we had him. I mean, the Potomac, man, is at flood stage right now, I can tell you that. But Congress is well equipped, according to Mr. Bookbinder, to make determinations that the special counsel decided were beyond his purview. So it doesn't end here. It doesn't end because Congress has the power only to remove, not to indict a president. It does not need to worry, as the special counsel appeared in the context of potential criminal prosecution, that its actions will hamper the ability of the president to continue to serve as chief executive. And Mr. Bookbind, I love this sentence, he says, if Congress votes to impeach and convict, it is ending, not hampering a president. There you have it right there. That's it in a nutshell. They wanted to hamper the president, but the real goal now is to end the presidency. So I have an idea. I'm always trying to help here at JMT. We're always, me and Billy Bob and all of us here, we're always trying to help. Believe it or not, we are. And so I got an idea that would be great for the country in general, certainly great for the president. We need another partial government shutdown. That's exactly what we need. Now, I'm not talking about the rank and file members of the federal government that are working. I'm talking about shutting down Congress. We just need to shut it down for the next year and a half, till the 2020 election, basically. 2 years, whatever that. Because think about this. The House ain't going to do anything, no matter whether it's Ocasio-Cortez, the real Speaker of the House, by the way, or Nancy Pelosi or whoever. As long as they control the House, which they will for basically the next 2 years, they're not going to approve anything of the president's agenda. Just forget about it. And the Senate has shown several times that they only have as much balls as the wind, which way the wind's blowing, right? So maybe they could meet every now and then just to confirm some judges and that kind of thing. So we might as well let the president, I'm not a big fan of executive order, to be honest with you. I'm not. But we might as well let the president just have it at it, because Congress is going to do nothing for the next 2 years no matter what, except try to make his life miserable. So what is the purpose? Why don't we just have a partial government shutdown and shut them down? I mean, it would save us a bunch. Don't pay them either, by the way. That's just my idea. But hey, some of us are sicker than others. Perhaps most crucially, congressional hearings play a pivotal role in articulating the enduring values of the republic. Wow. You really believe that? The reason for Congress to hold, has he looked at the polling that Congress is polling like below a dead rat right now? The reason for Congress to hold hearings is not to reach a preordained result. Wow. I mean, think about it. He's saying the reason for Congress to hold hearings is not to reach a preordained result. I mean, that's all they've ever done. That's exactly what they're doing now. The press has been doing that as well. Have you looked at the meltdown of the press over the last couple of days? It has just been unbelievable, man. What it reminds me of, the analogy I have, it reminds me of like when somebody famous dies, right? Somebody really famous dies. Within 2 minutes of their death, they've already got their obituary out, like on Facebook and in their art, because they've pre-written it, right? They've preordained it. Well, they've done the same thing with this. They knew that the Mueller report was going to come out nonsense, so they've been criticizing it for the last couple of weeks or months. You remember a few months ago you heard, we've got to pass legislation to protect the Mueller report. You didn't hear that the last month and a half, man. Because they already knew it was bullshit. They've known, as I told you earlier in the story, if you just tuned in, Rod Rosenstein said clearly over a year ago that no Americans were involved in any type of Russian collusion in those indictments that came out against the Russians. And now we have the Mueller report released that is telling you the same thing that we already knew over a year ago. No preconceived, no preordained here. But it is like an obituary. You know what obituary it is? It's the press's obituary, because I'm telling you right now, how can any rational person, forget whether you love Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump, somewhere in the middle, or just don't give a damn, how can you possibly trust most of the members of the press after all of this nonsense? I don't see how you can. And there's even some on Fox News, I don't see how you can. So your solution to that, by the way, is exactly what you're doing right now. Watch shows like John Martin Talks. That's what you need to do, because you're going to get the unvarnished truth here. I'm going to scrub away all this old wood, get to the hardwood truth here. That's what you're going to get here at JMT, and you're probably going to get a spin, and I do spin it a little bit like you won't get anywhere else. So if you're fed up with the mainstream media, I watch them so you don't have to. Just tune into us every single day live, Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock. Just check us out. You'll like it. Share it. If you like it, share it with your friends. But but he says here not to do the preordained, right? The investigation. He goes on to say, but rather to answer in public setting the question of whether the president's conduct is acceptable. Nothing about the president's ever going to be. The fact that he won is unacceptable, so how could he possibly be acceptable? While such inquiries have been and should continue to be a rare occurrence. Wow. That's all they're going to do for the next 2 years. That's why I say let's just shut them down. Congress and the American people have every right to insist that the individual who swears an oath to, and I agree with this, oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States has not abused his powers to protect himself or his associates from the reach of justice. I agree with that, but I would ask you this. Compare the president of the United States. Think about this. Let me reread that little portion of the oath, because they all take this same oath. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Who has done more to preserve, protect, and defend not only the Constitution, but the United States from enemies both foreign and domestic than DJT? Is it AOC? I don't think so. Is it Nancy Pelosi? Is it Chucky Schumer? We haven't heard much from him lately, man. He's probably afraid. I mean, who has done more to live up to their oath than Donald J. Trump? I would tell you nobody, but that's just my opinion. Opinionated fact, nonetheless. The fact that much of the evidence of Mr. Trump's obstruction occurred in plain view of the American people. In other words, Trump defended himself. This diminishes the seriousness of the conduct. Neither diminishes the seriousness of the conduct nor the need for further inquiry. Well, nothing would diminish the need for further inquiry, according to these yahoos. As the Mueller report states, no principle of law excludes public acts from the scope of obstruction statutes, and the president's obligations to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Well, the president was frustrated. The report even talks about that, right? Who wouldn't be frustrated with the nonsense? You worked as hard as President Trump did. You sacrificed as much as you've done. You got so many people pouring their hearts out trying to support you, and you're supposed to just sit back and take it? No. That's not the guy we elected the president. That is not the Donald J. Trump that we deplorables and dregs elected. And so I, for one, and I don't think many of you out there listening are surprised that Donald Trump defended himself at every corner. And for that, they call obstruction of justice, because that's all it is. It was public. They admit it was public. Everything he did was public. Our nation, think about it, we talked about this yesterday, and I don't know if you realize just how important. I made a point of it yesterday. Go back and check out our podcast. You can go to johnmartintalks.tv, John Martin Talks YouTube channel, or go directly to our John Martin Talks Facebook page. Like it and share it and push us out there. You can see that I told you one of the most important things that came out of Attorney General Barr's press conference yesterday was when he said that President Trump's administration, obviously the president, was offered the chance to look at this for executive privilege, and they chose not to exercise it in any way. I've never ever heard of a president, because they were quick, man. They will do executive privilege to their shoe size. I mean, presidents have done this for generations now. And for Trump to simply say, no, put it out there, that sounds like an innocent man to me, and one that trusts the American people. But he goes on to say here, Mr. Bookbinder, he says, our nation's founders saw fit to empower Congress with an extraordinary remedy to address extraordinary executive misconduct. He's right about that. Failing to take up the mantle of accountability at the moment where circumstances so clearly demand it, set an abhorrent precedent for our democracy. That's what he says. He goes on to say, Mr. Mueller did his job. It's time for members of Congress to do theirs. Wow. And I say, hey, By all means necessary, please do so. Do your job. Be my guest. Be the last bastion of fools if that's what you want to be. Go ahead and keep investigating the president. Impeach 45 if that's what you want to. Let me just tell you, there's only one, because you can't expect Congress to come to their senses. They're not. And even some Republicans are liable to cave. You know, you got King Rat, like pictured there. That's little Mitt, by the way. That's little Mitt Romney. That's what I call him. But he's King Rat. He thinks he's big, but he's really like
Notice how he's on a leash.
He's on a leash, man. I wish that the great people of the state of Utah would just do the right thing and recall this dude. But that's another story. But let me just tell you, the Congress is not going to do anything about this other than investigate. They're not going to take the truth. They can't handle the truth. You know, the truth will not set them free. None of that stuff. Because there's only one person out there that can make this right, and it's not even the president. There's only one person who can do it, and that is you, the American voter. You, the American people. You're the only one. People like Citizens for Trump, people like Deplorables Resistance, Jay, and people that are tuning into the show on John Martin Talks. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We went over 10K followers overnight. Thank you so much. It is the army of the dregs and the deplorables. You're the only ones, and any right, sane person that looks at this and sees it for what it is, you're the only people that can make this right, because Congress is not going to make this right. Together, all of those together, we got to do a couple things. We got to re-elect the president in 2020, Donald J. Trump. But what we also need to do is clear out this bastion of fools for 2020. All these people, we need to punish them. We need to send them a clear message that we're tired of your nonsense and we want to get on with the business of the American people and not only making America great again, but keeping America great and putting America first. The only people that can right this ship is you, the American people. That's it. That's it. And I'm going to do everything, as long as I have this microphone, the ability to reach out, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. And if I don't have this microphone for some reason, I'm going to be out on the street corner. And it won't be holding a "will work for food" sign, because it never worked for me, by the way. I mean, it's probably cheaper to give me money. But I'm going to be shouting from the political ramparts so we don't have to mount the real ramparts and punish these bastion of fools. All right, we're going to move on. This next article comes to you from the Washington Free Beacon, and it's a bit troubling. And I say this with no joy whatsoever. My subtitle of this is "How Did We Become a Bastion of Political Liberals?" And I took this straight out of the article. Kind of got me my word for the day. The article itself says, out of the Washington Free Beacon, U.S. intelligence institutionally politicized towards Democrats. So in other words, our entire secret organization he's talking a lot about the CIA, but he's basically making the case, and I'll get to it in just a moment, that our CIA has been infiltrated basically with just a bastion of liberal progressives. The CIA and other U.S. intelligence agencies have become bastions of political liberals, and the pro-Democratic Party views of intelligence personnel have increased under President Donald Trump, according to a journal article by a former CIA analyst. In other words, the swamp rat intelligentsia is growing. That's what that means. John Gentry, who spent 12 years as a CIA analyst, criticized former senior intelligence leaders, including CIA Director John Brennan, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, and former Deputy CIA Director Michael Morrell, along with former analyst Paul Pillar, for breaking decades-long prohibitions of publicly airing their liberal political views and attacking Trump. So, Barr needs to clean out this bastion of rats, right? And that list that Mr. Gentry just put out there is a darn good place to start. But, you know, it brings mind something I put on my Facebook page. There's a picture out there that I think might make a few people nervous. Have we got that picture? The people who might flip under pressure. Look at that right there. Those are some of the people that you could flop them either way. They're got to jail, and they're all not sleeping too well at night because they're wondering which of these sons are going to flip. Because one thing we know about rats, when they smell blood, they will eat another rat in a heartbeat. And so I think you're going to see over the next year and a half that some of this bunch right there pictured is going to flip on the others, and it is going to be one hell of a show to watch. The institutional bias outlined in a lengthy article in the Quarterly International Journal of Intelligence and Counterintelligence risk undermining the role of intelligence and supporting of government leaders charged with making policy decisions. So what he's saying here basically, at least these are my words, President Trump has exposed the rot inside of our institutions. President Trump has been criticized by some for criticizing our institutions like the FBI. But what he's really done, and it's not the rank and file, that the tree is not, the roots are still strong, but the tree is rotten at the top. All these political people. And this guy makes a good case for that. In the past, intelligence politicization was defined as either skewing intelligence to fit biases or manipulating intelligence by those outside the intelligence community. This next paragraph, man, is impressive. And these are Mr. Gentry's own words. He said, but in 2016, observers of U.S. intelligence began to wonder if the CIA's once firm prohibition on partisan politics had changed and to ponder whether a new kind of politicization, that's a hard word for me to say, had arisen, namely institutionally embedded partisan bias. I would just say, is there any doubt? I didn't have to read this article. You can just look. There's enough circumstantial evidence, let alone real evidence, that there is a partisan politics being played at the top levels of our government. Gentry points out, and especially our CIA, look at, the people that Obama appointed, he talks about that in a minute. Gentry points to the activities of senior retired intelligence officials during the 2016 campaign that universally criticized then candidate Trump and supported Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. That's not an opinion, ladies and gentlemen. That's just a fact. It absolutely happened, and it was really clear and made you kind of scratch your head. Gentry went on to say the attacks on Trump were unprecedented for intelligence officers in their substance, tone, and volume. Critics went far beyond trying to correct Trump's misstatements about U.S. intelligence. They attacked him as a human being. Trump derangement syndrome. He's absolutely right. They've attacked him as a human being, not just his policies. A president's policies, I don't have a problem with people attacking them. I have a problem with them lying about it, but they've made this very personal. They've attacked President Trump and members of his family very personally. Think about it. They even have attacked Barron Trump at the time he was 10 years old. Good Lord, man. So I wonder what he goes on to say. This article was written before the conclusions of the investigation report on Russia, so before the Mueller report, he wrote this article. So I'm wondering, what does he think now? He wrote this before the Mueller report came out, so he probably knew something we didn't know. Goes on to say here, the Justice Department is investigating whether FBI and senior officials acted properly in launching a counterintelligence investigation of ties between President Trump and Russia based on information contained in the Democratic Party funded dossier. In other words, the PP dossier. So this whole thing started with Papadopoulos, a PP dossier, and then moved on to Russian collusion, which they was not, to even collision with Stormy Daniels. Not a witch hunt, though. Gentry said in an interview that he has not seen any movement within the intelligence community to address the institutional politicization, in other words, the rot. He says, my guess is the issue is not going away. And I guarantee it's not, because the swamp, apparently, we're learning that the swamp is not only deep, but it's sneaky as well. And it stinks to high heaven. It says, recent books by Clapper, Michael Hayden, and former CIA and NSA director appeared to justify political attacks on Trump based on both former officials' claims that the president has adopted a different world view. So they attack him for adopting. Thank God, man. Thank God he's adopted a different worldview. Where has their worldview gotten us? Perpetual war? Nuclear threat from North Korea? giving nuclear bombs potentially to Iran, death to America, that are trying to wipe out our greatest friend. I mean, the list, the allies in Israel, I mean, the list is long, man. Thank God the president has a different worldview. I mean, my God, it's about time. But Gentry went on to say, former senior intelligence officials to make such blatantly, talking about Brennan and Clapper and that claptrap bunch, partisan statements is unprecedented. Unprecedented. And this guy is a teacher at Georgetown, okay? So it's not like he's some kind of hardcore right-wingist. He's a leftist probably. He's probably progressive himself. That's why he recognizes it to us. At least he's honest. But this is Trump derangement syndrome. Trump derangement syndrome is what he's basically, it's infected our intelligence departments. Gentry wrote that further investigation is needed to whether there is a liberal political institutional bias at the CIA because of if such bias exists, it would damage the agency's ability to carry out its primary mission, very true, of defending against threats and supporting senior leaders in making policy decisions. You think? Now, he goes on to talk about in here how one of the real dangers is that we'll be, and he says one of the solutions is to stop spying internally in the United States of America. And we now know for a fact that President Trump was right again from the very beginning that the FBI, maybe the CIA, but certainly FBI was, what in his words, wiretapping. And remember Comey came out recently and said, well, I never considered electronic surveillance spying. Well, what the hell is it? I'd say, I've just been electronically surveilling your home, Jay, but I've not been spying on you.
Yeah, try it again.
Yeah, I mean, give me a break, man. What is spying? What is wiretapping if it's not electronic surveillance? The crap they throw out and expect us just to eat is unbelievable. Thank God people like Citizens for Trump are tired of eating it or aren't eating it at all. Unless the questions about bias are answered, he says, Republicans may trust the CIA less and give the agency a smaller role. For Democrats, the bias will lead to using CIA as a tool to support its liberal agenda. That's true. I mean, if that's true, it's a problem because I want the CIA. And I don't want them to be pro-Trump, but I don't want them to be anti-Trump and nuts anyway. I mean, they should be non-biased political institutions. Non-political institutions. They should be looking out for America, period. And let us solve our own politics. I mean, I know that's probably not totally possible, but to be so overt with it, let alone covert with it, that the CIA has been and the FBI and all of our intelligence institutions is unbelievable. Gentry also notes that criticism of Trump by current and former officials contrasts sharply from intelligence officials' responses to criticism from Democratic presidents such as Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. So he's saying it's unprecedented. Keep in mind, Brennan literally more than once has called the president a traitor. A traitor. The president of the United States, a traitor. I don't ever remember any former CIA, FBI people calling any other president that. Now you could say, well, maybe there hadn't been, but this is a fantasy. The whole thing about it was a fantasy to start with, that somehow President Trump lived his whole life just so he could one day be Putin's pocket puppet. That is just nonsense from the beginning. Anybody who believed that is either a partisan hack or a bastion of fools, I can tell you that. But it's unprecedented what they're doing, because calling the president a traitor means that he should be executed. Because think about it. Ultimately, treason is a death sentence, potentially. And if the president is actually guilty of treason, then he should be hung from the yardarm, let alone the tree out in front of the White House. And I'm not saying that, but if it really were true, then absolutely, I'd be on their side. But it's not true. Leaks have increased sharply in an apparent bid to undermine Trump, and Gentry said a long-held prohibition against discussing partisan politics in the office has been set aside. So they're discussing it inside. Anti-Trump conversations are common in the CIA analytical units, and anti-Trump analysts also express their political views on Facebook. I mean, wow. CIA people, active CIA agents or members of the CIA analysts expressing their opinion, good or bad, on Facebook, man. I mean, come on. and then they accuse the Russians of a hacking. So, I mean, wow. I don't even know. I'm almost speechless on that, but I probably got something to say. Gentry speculates the politicized intelligence workforce may have been the result of check this out, of a large influx of young, inexperienced personnel after September 11th terrorist attacks. So really what he's saying is it's government expansion that has led to this. And he goes on to say that as is well documented, young people collectively are more left-leaning than other demographic groups. That might be changing, but in essence, I agree. He goes on to say they have recently been in colleges and universities, some of which have been conspicuously liberal through the strongly leftist outlooks of their faculty and administrators. So what he's saying is they've been indoctrinated. They haven't been educated so much as indoctrinated, man. Racial, and to hear this was really fascinating to me because this goes back to Obama. Racial and other diversity programs also contributed to the politicization. He said this led to demographic, not intellectual diversity becoming a dominant focus of our intelligence community leaders. That's a big statement. What he's saying is, translation of this, is that instead of it being a diversity of merit-based, so in other words, it doesn't matter what color you are, it's whether or not you're qualified and capable of doing the job. That's all that matters, which is all that should matter, right? He's saying that the criteria for picking intelligence people was based on diversity, like racial issues, quotas, and this type of thing. Think about that. Do you really want to, I mean, if you're flying in an airplane and it looks like it might start to crash, are you going to run up there and go, well, thank God the cockpit is full of diversity people? Are you just going to hope that that dude or that gal, regardless of color, knows how to fly the dadgum airplane? I mean, do you really going to be on the operating table of your heart surgeon, look up and go, well, you're not diverse, sir? I mean, come on. Competence is what we should be about, especially in the intelligence community. The color of your skin, man. If we ever needed a Dr. King's dream to come true where we judge people based on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin, it should really start with our intelligence community, right? I mean, give me a break. So he's basically saying under Obama and other Democratic leaders that the intelligence community was packed with people based on their ethnic diversity, which may in fact lead to their political lack of diversity. So anyway, but he says this so-called anti-Trump resistance by Democrats refusing to deal with Trump on any issue also contributed to the problem with intelligence officials joining the deep state. This attitude is incompatible with a core principle of established democracies, the acceptance of a change of power after losing an election. He's basically saying that people inside the CIA and other intelligence communities could not accept the fact that Donald Trump won. That's what he's saying. That's solid truth, man. That's solid truth. And we've seen evidence of that across the board. It's a shame, but that's another part of the swamp, man. That sneaky part that President Trump needs to get rid of. Okay, I'm going to read one more thing, and then we're going to get into a last little quick article here. He goes on to say here, and I really like this, he says, the United States and elsewhere, liberals during the Cold War years often worried that unaccountable intelligence and security agencies were running amok. So liberals used to actually be afraid of the controlling politically of the intelligence community. He says now progressives welcome an ideology-centered left deep state. So the very people that used to be anti-government, afraid of government, didn't trust authority. Remember when that used to be a bumper sticker, never trust authority? And they used to have a slogan back when I was in the late 60s and early 70s when I was kind of growing up, don't trust anybody over 30 kind of thing, man. You remember when the left, the old hippies, whatever happened to them, man? I don't know. I guess they all became whatever. But it says, he goes on, they welcome an ideological center-left deep state built in part upon policies like Obama's as a check on Trump, and conservatives are complaining. So he's basically saying that progressives thrive in the swamp. The deeper, the sneakier, the smellier it is, the more progressives will grow. And it is very, very scary. All right, we got one last little story we're going to cover because it kind of ties into all of this. And it comes to you from none other than Politico. I cook some of these things so you don't have to. And my little subtitle is Man, the Bastion of Insanity, or Run. Run! Democrats run from impeachment post-Mueller. So this article is basically saying that Democrats now are running scared. They're not going to impeach the president. Well, that's not true always. Robert Mueller's report reveals a stunning array of new allegations. Stunning. It's the same old nonsense they've been leaking for 2 years. But one thing remains the same. House Democrats are ducking any talk of impeachment. Well, not all of them. AOC said she'd sign off on it. Of course, impeach 45. Maxine Waters, that's the only thing she's like a parrot, man. Impeach 45, impeach 45. That's all she could really say. She is literally unhinged. The article here in Politico says, after interviews with 15 lawmakers, Thursday it's clear Democrats think the report is severely damaging to the president. Why'd they have to interview anybody? I could have told you that they thought that. They thought that before. They were hoping it was. They were interviewed and they said, this thing is severely damaging the president. It wouldn't have mattered what they said. They were going to come out with that. They had a preordained conclusion, trust me. This is one of them that commented on. Representative Raul Gravala, Democrat from Arizona. He said, election time is when you beat Trump. And he's a senior member of the progressive wing. I didn't know. I keep hearing. I didn't know there was any other wing, but who was early supporter of impeachment efforts for previous Congress. He went on to say, right now, talking about Trump, he's got enough protection around him from top lawyer in the country, talking about General Barr, in the country to keep him in office. And let me tell you what he's got. What Trump has got besides the Sojourner of Truth, like they wanted to name that district. Besides the truth on it, he's got the drag army, man. He's got deplorable resistance, man. He's got all of that. He's got us, and they hate you. There's one person out there in the world that they hate more than Trump. You know who they hate more than Trump? You. They hate you. They hate anybody who supports the president because they know that a nation that supports President Trump will never support this bullshit that they're trying to feed you. And that terrifies them because they want to hold on to power no matter what. But this House Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, a paragon of virtue, if there ever was one, says, based on what we have seen to date, going forward, an impeachment is not worthwhile at this point. He said, very frankly, there is an election in 18 months and the American people will make a judgment. That's true. But let me just tell you, if true, all of you people, let me talk to you snowflakes out there, you members of Congress, from AOC to impeach 45 to Steny Hoyer, to any of them, Chuck Schumer, I don't care. If you can look in the mirror and you honestly believe that the president is a traitor, like Brennan said, that he's guilty of colluding with the Russians, that he's guilty of covering up all this, forget the Stormy Daniels and all that nonsense. But if you truly believe that the president is basically the puppet of Vladimir Putin, then if you do not impeach him today, you're cowards. You're cowards and you're not living up to your oath of office. Now, I don't think that he should be impeached because I don't think he's guilty. He's guilty of only one thing, winning. But if you can honestly, I don't know if I don't think they're capable of this. If you can honestly look at yourself in the mirror and say that the president is guilty of all the crap you're spewing, then you owe it to the American people.
They can't see themselves in the mirror, John. They're blood-sucking vampires.
I know Shifty Schiff can't, because I'm telling you, look at a picture of that dude, man. If that dude is not one of them gay vampires off of True Blood, I don't know. And I know I could be risking my life. I don't know which is worse, risking criticizing the wildebeest and getting suicided, or being attacked by the gay vampires. But it says here, several lawmakers, including Pelosi, used the first leg of the 2-week congressional recess to travel overseas, over in Europe right now, avoiding the political storm in Washington after reports release on Thursday. So all the Democrats are avoiding all this. You know why? Because rats don't do well in the light of day. They just don't. Check my time. I only got about 2 minutes left. I want to get right down. I'm going to read something here. This is coming from Brad Sherman. He's a Democrat from California. He says, a lot of progressives are saying What's the matter with you guys? What's it going to take? Sherman said. The legal case is there. The political case is still to be made. So he's basically, this is one of the guys that called for impeachment of Trump. Now he's backing away from it. They're cowards all. I stand by it. If you actually believe that President Trump is guilty, you owe it. Pelosi effectively took impeachment off the table earlier this year, saying impeaching Trump just not worth it. Think about that. Earlier this year. And she and other top Democrats notably avoided any nod to impeachment in statements released after Mueller's report on Thursday. But just listen to that. Think about it. Pelosi took impeachment off the table months ago, right? Right after, basically, she became Speaker of the House. Why? Because they knew the Mueller report was bogus. That's why. They've known it all along. That's what really needs to, if anybody knew about the report, it wasn't the president, it was them. He knew he was innocent. They knew it was bullshit. You know, what do you say? But they knew it was from the beginning. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show today as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. A lot of these articles, the ones I brought up, I would encourage you to, I'm putting them on your radar screen. Go back and look at some of them. They're much longer than I can do in any one particular show, and there's a lot of great information there, especially that one about the CIA. You really ought to look at that because it's pretty frightening, and it certainly has a solid ring of truth to it. But thank you so much for putting us over the 10,000 mark. Keep going to our Facebook page, liking it, sharing with others. All of you other Facebook groups out there that are like Citizens for Trump and Deplorable Resistance, thank you so much. If you're a Facebook page out there that wants to join our show, wants us, sees a value in what we're offering, the unvarnished truth, just contact us and maybe we can work something out. But above all else, ladies and gentlemen, beyond having a great weekend, happy Good Friday and Easter weekend to you. Truly, from my heart, my family to yours, have a blessed day.